everybody can make it happen if the circumstances are ideal. The people who really make it happen from themselves are the people who work with their own circumstances.
Dr. Rizwan Qureshi, emergency physician and business owner.
So first, as I said, you have to be driven. Make every day count. I value the success which is a result of a failure. When you try make explanations and reasons for you, that will lower your bar of standard. You have to just keep on telling yourself, despite all the odds, that it may just happen. Be confident in your approach and don't give everybody or anybody a leeway to just walk all over you. It's not acceptable, and that person will get a lesson of their life not to repeat it again. You have to have a practical approach in life. You're just worth so much more, and things and opportunities always turn up. There are different lessons from every challenge, and I think you should make those challenges work for you. Even if you can extract a small success, trust me, that small success is like going to grow as a compounding interest.
Rizwan, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Hamza. How are you?
Good, thank you.
We made it happen finally.
I know, it was a stressful
crazy.
morning.
Honestly, this morning, I had my doubts. I thought, man, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
And but you know, the inner self, you've got this inner zeal and commitment that I've got to make it happen somehow. And once I made this decision, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Honestly, everything just felt right into place. I was
good.
able to organize some bypasses.
Yes.
And here I am. I never imagined I'd be here.
Oh, good. I'm very glad. Thank you so much. I know it was really far for you, so I do honestly appreciate that. So I want to jump right into it, and I want to talk about whenever I meet someone who's very successful like yourself, I always wonder to myself, what was this person like when they were my age? Because to me, getting to that point seems so far away, and so I try and think of, can I make, these huge sort of people more relatable? So take me back to 27-year-old Rizwan. What was life like? What did he spend his days doing?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, I've never had a formal chance of reflecting on that journey, thinking about it. But when I was 27, actually, I was at very important crossroads of my life, Hamza. And I remember quite vividly, that was the time actually when I finished my med school. In fact, I'd finished my house job, which is equivalent to an internship year here in Australia. And, my wife, who was obviously not my wife at that time, and she said, look, we need to get married before we set off. And we had pretty much laid out our plan that we want to go to the UK. And I said, okay, why don't you let me go first over to the UK, establish myself, and then we'll get married, and that would be a more civilized way of doing things. Right now, I've got anything on me. Like, I can barely afford my own ticket. She said, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you come back, I might not be available. So I was under...
She's smart. She's putting pressure on you.
I was under pressure. So, look, I was pretty independent from the get-go. I remember from my childhood, although from the adolescence time, I was always into this, business-minded thing. So I had done a few electives back in the UK, and at that point, I was doing some side hustle. So I had some savings, and that savings I utilized to organize my marriage. So I got married. We moved over to the UK, and, foreign graduates have to do UK licensing exam like PLAB. So we both did that. We passed, and then... it was just one hell of a journey from passing the PLAB 2 till getting our first job in the UK. Well, my first job in the UK. And she eventually got the job as well. But I think it was just a learning on so many different fronts. You were applying for about nearly 100, 200 jobs a week.
Oh my God.
And you were getting shortlisted for a few, only to hear the rejections.
Yeah.
So it came to a point, quite honestly, Hamza, that I was thinking, is it all worth it? Like, I'm only 27, 28. I've got a young family. In fact, we were expecting our first child at that time. Yeah. And I was, living with my uncle, who luckily at that time, he was not married. So he was just pretty much housing us. And I thought, look, there's got to be a better way of doing things. I'm just not in the right place. Yep. Look, it's just putting so much pressure on me and my wife. But as soon as our visa was about to expire, I got the shortlisting, which was a miracle of sorts. And then eventually, we managed to get started in the UK. And I think reflecting back onto that one, if I think about what was the thing which kept us going at that point, which was this unshakable belief that we will get there. It may take time. We never thought of option B. Even though, the pressure was mounting, the visa was running out, we were expecting a first child, we were doing exams and unable to get the date. So everything was up against you. But instead of thinking option B and C, which were there in the back of our minds, but we just thought maybe, I think it's better not to vocalize and verbalize it and tell it to ourselves. We were just like, look, we still need to carry on with emotions. We just need to keep on applying for jobs, keep on turning off for clinical observership, do all the things which we are meant to be doing, and, see what happens. And the cutoff date has already been laid out for us because our visa expires in January. And there's nothing we can do about it. And yes, we may have to start from scratch in Pakistan. We lost about a year. And lo and behold, got the first shot. I think it was my 5th or 6th shortlisting for an interview. And you go and pitch up for an interview. I did the interview, and when they told me we're offering you a job of SHO orthopedics, I was like, man, I was just speechless.
It would have been huge.
It's a very strange feeling when you're extremely happy. You don't know how to express your emotion being happy.
Yes, I know exactly the feeling.
And at the same time, you were like inside of you were feeling like you wanted to cry almost. But then again, you don't have that emotion momentum to manifest that as crying as well. So it was a very strange feeling. The first phone call was to my wife that, look, I've got the job. And she couldn't believe it. She said, no, you're joking.
It would have been a huge moment.
Oh, yes. And I remember, talking to my mother that, look, I want to do everything. Like I want to do post-graduation. I want to do these very high demand jobs. But I'm almost as if I'm limited.
Right.
And I'm not able to give my full. And she gave me a very good lesson at that point. She said, look, everybody can make it happen if the circumstances are ideal. The people who really make it happen from themselves are the people who work with their own circumstances. And I think that was a very good reflection because in an ideal world, you will have everything working for you. And, things might be easy. You would imagine that. But in a non-ideal world, you will have challenges, the sickness, the, unable to find a job. And that advice didn't quite sink it with me. But later down the line, what happened is everything start to happen despite the challenges. And I was talking to one of my friends who was struggling to pass the fellowship exam. And I asked him that, look, I've got a family. I've got a daughter with special needs. I've got a young baby son. Yet I'm able to pass the exams despite all those commitments. What is your reason? And he said to me, no reason. So sometimes I think these challenges make you smart. And evidence-based, if you look at the exam results of the FACEM exam, most of the people who have done very well are all parents.
Interesting.
And if you look at the postgrad, it just makes you synchronize. It just makes you realize the value of time. If you've got half an hour, it's half an hour. If you've got half a day, it's half a day. You might not see that kind of time again.
So I had a question for later. I guess I'll ask it now. I always find it really interesting what people's perspective is in terms of why do they think they succeeded and others didn't? And it sounds like you're saying to me that because you had so much at stake, you almost had to succeed. Is that right?
So first, as I said, you have to be driven. Despite the odds, you have to have that spark. Now, I'm not quite sure about what you mean by success. Everybody defines the success in their own way, be it financial, be it, being able to achieve the fellowship in exams and having a nice house and all that. That's one way of doing it. For me, the success is to be able to meet your short-term and long-term goals. And financial reward is a part of that journey.
Right.
Which obviously is quite beneficial to have. For me, it was obviously in the face of the challenges, you've got that spark to make it happen and get up in the face of those challenges and make every day count. So that actually sets you up in a bit of a momentum. And then when you get these small rewards, but plenty of failures, you feel that you're getting closer. And I've been listening and reading a lot of books. And I think I value the success which is a result of a failure. My journey was never a smooth one, as I've just told you. Yes, from the exam point of view in PLAB and, MRCS, which I did, it was not bad. But in Australia, I faced quite a bit of, I could not pass my fellowship exam the first time. In fact, it used to be the old format fellowship exam.
Right.
And Hamza, I tell you, I put everything in there.
Yeah.
I managed to pass the writtens, and that was like, oh my God. I passed the writtens.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that time.
and at that point, if you pass the writtens, then you have to pass the clinicals
Yes.
to make it count as a cumulative. So if you pass the written and then you fail the clinicals, the whole thing goes to zero.
That's really
You have to reset the entire fellowship again.
Jesus.
So I passed the written, but then I couldn't pass the clinical. And everything became zero.
So in that moment, what are you telling yourself? Because I feel like so many people would quit and so many people would be like, I'm not going to do this. Why is it that you kept persisting?
I'm a human being as well. And I reflected on that time and I thought, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go into general practice, or it's not possible for me. And when you try make explanations and reasons for you, you almost convince yourself to a substandard.
Right.
It was that I convinced myself. I talked to a few of the friends who agreed with me.
Right.
You talk to your parents and they cannot see you suffering.
Right.
And I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case for everyone. Maybe some people are obviously at that emotional period or physically exhausted, and for them going into an alternative pathway might be a reasonable one. But for me, it was telling myself I cannot do it, but inner self saying you've got to do it. You have got attempts there. You've done so much. You've got to give it a go. So I took a year.
Yeah.
Just sinking in, enjoying my training. I said, I've already done my clinical part in terms of training.
Yeah.
I just need to take a year back and just relearn the entire thing.
Right.
And I just went into the uniform motions of going to the public library, working, enjoying my work, and then redid the writtens, passed it, did the OSCEs, and passed it. And trust me, at that day, I did not have any reason, and I just cried. That emotional synchrony was there, and I know how to manifest that. And that was that cry that happened. So, it was never easy. It's never easy for anyone, but you have to just keep on telling yourself, despite all the odds, that it may just happen.
I think it's really nice that you were able to have that moment where you had those like happy tears. The only thing I can relate to with that in the sense is I didn't get directly into medicine. I had to do medical science first, and I tried for like 3 years to get into it. And it was just always this thing where I'd always be like, oh, should I just quit? Should I just stop? And that moment when I got the email that I got in, it's exactly how you were saying. I didn't know how to feel. Like I remember I woke up and I like went to my mum and my brother. I was like, oh, I got in. And they were over the moon. And I was just like, I don't know, this is crazy. Like, I don't even feel like I deserve this. This is crazy, even though you've worked so hard for it.
I watched your video. In fact, me and Asad both watched it.
Amazing.
And that what's convinced me that I must talk to you. Because I was exactly like that. Up until year 10, I was a very average student. Like, I would probably say below average.
Right.
And then in the last 2 years, I just made it happen. In fact, I was just like working because my mom said to me, like, we come from a very average family. If you don't get to do what most people do in order to have a better life in typical brown families, you're not gonna have. Nothing's gonna happen for you. So in year 11 and year 12, I just worked like an overtime.
Yeah.
And when I got myself into med school in Dow Medical Colleges, which is very good, prestigious med school in Karachi, exactly that feeling. You don't know what to feel. You feel kind of numb. I think it's like the same with shock when you are bereaving or something of sad news. You just don't know how to react.
I think you're just so grateful as well. Like it was just like the feeling I had was, why do I deserve this and other people didn't get this? And it just made me wonder, like, what was it that I was given? And I thought maybe it's just a blessing and I should just take it as that. And it was a really nice experience. I thought, we all given blessings after our hard work. And so I thought it was a really nice moment in my life.
That's true. And I love the way that you've put it in that video. It was just amazing.
If you had to credit all your success you've achieved in your life, and success, whatever it defines to you, to one keystone habit, what would you say that habit is? If you just had to pick one.
Getting up early in the morning.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. I hate that. Why? Why that?
I think I'm a morning kind of person.
Yeah.
And before I get up in the morning, I make sure that I've had a good sleep last
Right.
night. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen because I'm working in emergency.
Yeah.
But I think if you are an early morning person, the night before you organize your mini mental notes,
Right.
what I've got to do. And you can get so much done in the wee hours in the morning. I remember when I was preparing for my fellowship exam, I used to have my alarm set up at 4 o'clock and do this unhindered study between 4 and 7. And then kids would wake up at 7. I'll drop them off to school. But I would have done 3 hours of uninterrupted study. And it was a huge momentum because during the day, there's so many interruptions and all that, that it just, you never get to have a 3-hour block, at least as a family person.
Yes. Yeah.
With that kind of undivided attention after a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So that sort of set the precedence for everything. Even now with my business, first thing in the morning, I'm in my room.
Yeah.
I've got everything laid out in my notes that this is what I've got to do. Answer some emails from everywhere. Just do the few things, write up some scripts. I think that morning thing, it just sets you and paces you so well. I would credit, obviously, the people surrounding you. They're so important.
Yeah.
They're able to absorb so much of the wrong things that have happened to you. It's just one of those things which you never understand how they're helping you. But they, especially in emergency as well, because there's so much happening in emergency. Like you see cases and traumas, and sometimes you see deaths in pediatrics, and you need a comfort. So I think all those people in your family who you can just open up to, or sometimes even not talk about the things that are bothering you, it just helps. So I think valuing your time, be it your morning person, be it a late night person, and sticking around with your family are the two most important catalysts for any success.
That's really interesting. What do you think are other daily habits that you engage in that sustain your success? So you said waking up early when you were training was helping you, but what about right now? Is there anything else you would say that is just a habit that you have to do every day that sustains your current success?
I have to think about it. There's so many things now, especially now. Most of my time, Hamza, is with my business, the emergency focus that I'm doing right now. It's a lot of teaching, organization, and it's just relearning the entire fellowship at a completely new level. And one of the shortcomings which I had when I was trying to grow my business in the early years is that doing everything myself. And you can only do so much. You've got a little YouTube channel. You've also got like the courses that you're running, and plus you're working and looking after your family. And you can only do too much in each of these segments to make it work. So I think the power of delegation and teamwork, it's just so vital. And what we've done in the last 1 year is just we've made teams. This is a team for X course and Y course and Z course. I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to head with the leadership. So I think distributing your task amongst the people who are most valuable with their individual strength to carry out that task in the way which is in your mind, or perhaps even better, that empowerment or that delegation of empowerment is just so important for business success. So from my point of view, as an individual, delegation. And ensuring the quality that each of the delegates is able to produce. I'm finding it very new to all that, and I'm finding this speed that it's very exciting. You can delegate 20 tasks and just leadership at the helm of all the big spaceship that you're running. So it's very exciting at the same time. The time can be limited. I'm working, people ask me how many days you work clinically and how many days you work not clinically. I said I work 3 days clinically and 7 days a week non-clinically with my business.
That's the thing about business that I always find really interesting, is that like you never switch off. You're just always on it. I guess for me, the equivalent is just YouTube. Is I always am thinking about it. Like whenever I come home, I'm like, okay, like what am I going to do about this? There's no cutoff time. Like at least with emergency, when I go home, maybe I think about it for like half an hour and be like, okay, like what were these cases? What could I improve? But then with the YouTube, it's just always there. And I love that, but I also don't like it as well, because sometimes you just want to relax and like have a day off and do nothing. So for you, it sounds like you work really hard, almost 7 days a week. What do you think is motivating you to work so hard?
That's a very important question, and I think I'm pretty sure what's motivating me. You see, emergency physician or being a doctor in the medical system, working full time to sustain yourself, develop yourself, professionally grow, and support your family down the line. I just don't think it's a very productive way of professional growth and sustaining your family. You will eventually burn out to some degree.
Right.
Some people may say that, look, they're working full time, but you see the longevity of working as a clinician full time.
Yeah.
I think at a certain age, you would like to dial back, like, I need to pace myself down. I need to expand myself into more teaching or education or research or admin or something like that. I think they realize quite late what their niche might be. With business, it's kind of different. You need to lay the foundations quite early on.
Right.
So by the time you're tiring from your clinical work, you've got a business which is well set up.
Right.
And already doing a job for you. There's no such thing as self-sustainable business.
Yes.
You have to put in your every bit of an effort in there to make it work. So I was quite fortunate to realize that my passion is in, international medical graduate. I've been through that journey with all the turmoil that we've talked about at personal and professional level. And I think I could relate to each one of them because they were asking me all these things. Yeah. So how about I learn to do that as a business? And Alhamdulillah, we've been very successful. Every year, our revenue's just grown substantially. And this is looking like our strongest year from the year before. So I think for me, the passion is to, when I turn, 55 or 60, I've got a business which is actually working for me.
Yeah.
And I can still do the leadership, do the mentorship, and enjoy the fruits of that business.
Right.
While clinical there is that for more of a passion.
Right.
And it's not my full-time job.
What about when you were younger? What was motivating you then? Was it your family? Was it, someone in your life that you wanted to work hard for? What was it?
So I think it comes also a little bit of genetic makeup as well. My father was a commercial pilot. He was initially
That's awesome.
Yeah, so he was in Air Force. He was a fighter pilot, and then he went into commercial pilot. And then I saw him, he had a lot of time on his hands because, you go on to flights and you come back, you've got a week off, and then you've got another week on.
Right.
So in between those times, he was always thinking of these ideas. He never get to do that but we used to have these very lengthy dinner discussions. Yeah. Oh, what if we do that? What if we do this? What if we open up a chain of stores? Or, what if we open up an institute?
He was a dreamer.
My mother was a goer. She was, as a Montessori teacher, I was just telling you about. And she, stopped her job in a public sector and she opened up her own Montessori.
Wow.
And I actually helped her, writing all those, what we call that pamphlets and prospectus of that Montessori. And, that sort of ignited a little bit of passion. Like this really sounds very interesting. This is really cool. You're doing that. And she had a very good opening. She had lots of children coming in. It was good financially. I could see her well-being because now it was her own business. She was passionate about it. Then my uncle was quite successful in his business of pharmaceutical. And I think they just laid in a peripheral vision. They were this role models, which were just feeding in me.
Yeah.
I think I was also fortunate to surround myself with people quite early on in my career who just kept that spark going.
Right.
So when I was in the UK and I was looking for my first job and I had to, support myself, my uncle's friend, he had a mobile phone stores and he used to sell what we call fascias, the mobile phone faces, covers and all the accessories. So he said, Rizwan, you're not doing anything. You're not getting a job. So whilst you're working to find your first job, he was a Chinese man.
Right.
And why don't you go and take my prospectus and pamphlets to different parts of London? I said, fine, what is in it for me? Oh, you'll be on commission. I said, well, sounds like a plan. So I actually helped establish his business. So I think 30% of his sales were coming from my traveling to different parts of outer London. I got to see so much London through tubes and everything. It was just amazing. Yeah. And that seeds of entrepreneurship were just like there and they were just vibrating in my
growing.
Yes. I even dabbled into so many other things when my wife was looking after our daughter and I said, why are you sitting home? You could do something. Why don't you, eBay was big at that time. There was no Amazon. Why don't you sell something on eBay? Yeah. And we tried dabble into selling some sweatshirts and made a reasonable profit out of it.
Oh, good.
So and I remember then I was doing, the fellowship study and, the study you get into the zone where it gets boring. and your mind sort of procrastinate into other things. I said, man, trust me, when I'm out of this, I'm going to do this and that. And it was all business A, business B, business C. So once I got my wings, I was already a horse, a stallion,
just
which is
ready to go,
ready to bolt off. So it was just a matter of getting the formula which was in my mind to get it manifested. So I was going to do it. And one of the things which I've learned about business, you do things and you learn the business along the way. You never plan the business, which my father did, and never get to do it. You do your first thing.
Yeah.
You take up your risks and weigh your risks, pros and cons. And
you learn by doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's so much, like I remember the first course that I was about to launch, the profitable one, my team actually left me 1 week before the course.
Oh my God.
And I'd taken the fee, and the fee was huge.
Oh my God.
So my entire team, like there were 4 doctors in it. They were meant to be teaching online. It was the peak of the COVID time. And they just left. They could not agree to the remuneration. And I said, all right. If that's the challenge, that's the challenge. That's a business challenge. You have to learn yourself, and it might not be the first one. It might not be the last one. And I start making phone calls. And lo and behold, I had 8 people who wanted to come and join me in that venture. And that was the most successful course, which I kept on running. And now it's all available online. It was just amazing. So I think the business teaches you quite a lot of things at both personal level, how to deal with the people, professional integrity, how to keep yourself in a high quality niche market.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's now becoming a passion just because you learn so many new things which are not part of your professionalism.
As you were talking about that, I was just thinking about some stat my brother, so my oldest brother, he's in startup businesses and he has his own startup, and we were talking about how less than 1% of all startups end up becoming successful. Same with business, and same with, it seems like, YouTube as well. And so I was telling him, I was like feeling frustrated because with YouTube it feels so stagnant, and there's times where nothing's really happening, and then there's random growth, and then there's times where nothing's happening. So what are you telling yourself when you were facing those times in business when there was just nothing going and like you didn't see any progress, even though you were putting in the effort, you're putting in the work? Was there anything you're telling yourself in those moments, like, I just have to get to this point, or I should just see it like this?
This is a very good, interesting question. And my idea of business is to have a very lean approach. So I don't have a capital to invest. My main investment, I often say, is my time. So I was not invested in from the point of view, I've got a $50,000 capital, which I must get a yield back to the bank. Otherwise I'll be busted. So when I launched my first course, it was like, okay, $15 a piece, and we'll just sell seats, and we made $1,000 out of it.
Right.
All right. The other thing is that I know with different businesses, the projection and the trajectory might be quite different.
Right.
I think for me, things have been very fortunate that everything has sort of complemented.
Right.
So when I completed my fellowship exam, I was already doing this mentorship on a non-official and non-business basis. So I knew in my mind what I needed to do. I was already teaching on courses for friends. So I knew that I can do it much better.
Yes. Right.
When I started my first courses, they would sell out. The first course that I did was in Pakistan. So I get the idea, and the feedback that I got from the participant, we need more hands-on.
Like clinical skills?
Yeah, clinical skills. So I think you need to listen to your participants to find that niche. And when you just completely disregard your participant, so when you've identified the niche, when you've got a basic idea, then you've got a winning formula. That's one thing. The other thing with my YouTube thing, I never took it as a business. It was more like to, just vent myself and relate to some of the examples and stories. And everybody related it to so well. So people often make a mistake of, I won't say mistake, but people often take a different approach. They want their YouTube channel to be a business. And for some people, honestly, it will do very well. My idea was that, look, YouTube, by the time it becomes a business, it will be 10 years, 20 years down, 10 years at least down the line, or at least 5 years down the line. But I don't see myself making that much money from YouTube in the first few years. So I need to run my business, and I need them to be complemented. So people are now, my customers are coming from YouTube, who are buying my courses. So if you compare my business revenue, it could be compared to any successful YouTube channel, which, I mean, the YouTube is still sort of there, but it's not the mainstream of income. it is actually complementing my business.
Right.
So you've got this lean approach of having the idea, which is built on feedback, understanding the niche of the market,
Yeah.
and then making all the social platforms work for you.
Yeah.
Instead of, treating them as individual business, you just going into perfect harmony. And this day and age of, information and social media.
It sounds like to me that YouTube was this sort of accessory to the main thing, and the main thing was a business. And so for me, I guess where I sort of pivoted for YouTube was initially I was just making videos to try and be successful on YouTube. And then I thought, okay, I'm not really getting anything from just making these videos by myself. And that's why I pivoted more into podcasts, because I was like, at least I can get something and have an interesting conversation with someone and learn something from someone. And then that can be recorded and put up on YouTube. And so if that works out, that's fine. But I still gain something by doing this whole process. And it sounds like for you, you still gain something by building that business. And then YouTube is this other thing that's just sort of happening on the side. Is that right?
That's completely correct. The other thing I would just like to add in that the growth of the business is actually defined by the customers.
Right.
So you may have an idea that, look, I want to launch a course, and that would be my business. I'll grow that course. That would turn out to be, $100,000 course at every launch, and so on and so forth. But then again, people approach you with different ideas, and one attitude and one instinct you must always say, yes, I can do it.
Just say yes. Be
Just
a yes,
say yes.
man.
Yes. So I'll give you an example. I think last week it was, there was a radiologist who approached me from Nigeria. Now I do these interview workshops for junior medical officer and registrars. So this radiologist approached me from Nigeria that, look, I've been accepted as partially comparable specialist.
Okay.
And I've got this interview in Westmead Hospital Breast Care Institute or something like that. Can you help me prepare for an interview? And I said for a moment, look, I've done interviews for surgeons, for emergency physicians, for GPs, for GMOs, lots of them. But radiology is a completely different niche, man. I don't know how it even works. And I could say no, but my businessman inside it, man, you turning,
make it work.
You're turning away the money. And she'd already purchased the ticket and everything. I could just return the amount and say, look, you're better off with someone else.
Yeah, right.
I said, no, I'll just prepare myself for this interview.
Yeah.
How hard could it be? Most of the interviews are on the same sort of framework structure. There's some non-clinical elements, there's some clinical elements, and there's a lot of professional behavior and personal elements to it.
Yeah.
And we can scale up to that. We did the interview, went for about an hour and a half. And yesterday she sent me an email, thank you, I've got the job.
There you go.
Can you imagine? So the customers actually define your scaling up.
Yeah.
I'm getting lots of offers from partnership from big conglomerates now that, look, can you develop this for us and can you develop that for us? I think the growth is now only limited by my own availability of the time, which can be, a bit of hinging issue on your personal mindset and personal well-being.
Yeah.
But I think in the initial, when you're experimenting and you're trying to, evolve into something which is concrete, you've got to take everything is an experiment and you learn as the part of that process.
Yeah. I really agree with that part of that you said, just be a yes man.
Yes.
Every time an intern comes to me in ED and they're like, I want to do more of this or that. I'm like, just say yes to everything.
That's true.
Like if someone asks you, can you do this? Say yes. And then go do it. And then just try. And like, if you fail, that's fine.
Yep.
Because like we talked about before, you learn by doing. And so you need to fail it first and then understand how to do it. And then later you'll be good. Talking about medicine more specifically, I watched one of your videos talking about bullying in medicine, and I was interested to know, is there ever been experiences that you've had in medicine relating to bullying, or have you ever felt like any racism happened to you in the medical field?
Yeah. So I think the bullying in medicine is there. There's no point denying the fact that it's not there.
Yeah.
However, the tone is quite different from a mainstream bullying. So you may get a conflict which is more subtle, but then again the ramifications of that subtle conflict could still be quite detrimental on your own personal well-being. So there might be a complaint which was completely out of proportion. There might be a remark which is just completely setting you or winding you up in your personal space. And the most important thing is to be aware of those issues. I was working in the UK with one surgeon who just completely targeted me when I refused to go to his party in the house.
What?
We started on a very good note.
Yeah.
Like he was one of the very good teachers, mentors.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Oh, Rizwan, I'm having this new house, and why don't you come over?" And I had, young daughter. My wife was alone. I didn't want to leave them out, and I couldn't take her in because it was like night thing.
Yeah.
And I just didn't turn up. Like, I mean, I said to him that I cannot turn up,
Yeah.
and he just took it against as a personal insult. And his reports coming out, his term assessment will just... And I sat down with him and I confronted him, like, what's wrong here? Like, I'm trying to do my everything according to the book, and you're just completely cornering me in every segment. And he said, look, if my boss would have invited me a party to his house, I would have made sure that I'm there at any cost. So I said, okay, fine. So that's what it's all about. Well, you're not going to be my reference. I'm going to go and leave now. So there's so many different ways of dealing with that. And and you just got a ways of dealing with that situation. And lately what I've done, now I'm in a different position. I'm working as a consultant.
Yeah.
And sometimes even amongst the consultant, you get this little bit of edgy situation. And sometimes, certain people think they can overpower you because they're in the system and they've been there longer, or they've got a slightly more, seniority to you.
Yeah.
But my advice is be confident in your approach.
Right.
Don't let anybody be having this full control over you. I think our psyche as South Asian is very apologetic psyche, very smiley, very kind-hearted.
Absolutely.
And that just gives this unlimited options to anyone. You can get pushed over. And so when I start off with anyone and I feel that there's a little bit of, antagonism or threat, I just go twice over. I just become completely their friend, completely at ease. If they're even serious, I just take it as a joke. And then they would just understand, look, we can't just bully them around or muscle them around. He's either not taking it seriously or he's not either getting the point. But then I actually take a step forward and I try to make sure that, look, I know what it's all about, and I'm aware of my rights, and I'm aware in my mindset where you are right and I am right, and this confrontation is not going to go well. So communication around these issues is good, but at the same time, you have to stay very strong and don't give everybody or anybody a leeway to just walk all over you.
I think what comes to mind is, I remember a moment for me when that happened was I was an intern and I had like a senior registrar, and she'd be really sort of callous and mean to me and sort of shame me in front of other people in terms of like, oh, you don't know how to do this? How do you not know how to do that? And I was like, I'm an intern, like I'm still learning. And that would feel really demoralizing because, medicine for so long of my life was like my dream. And then coming into the career and feeling crushed there, I think it was really unfortunate because it made me really jaded towards the experience, and it led to me burning out later because I was just so fed up with the whole sort of environment. And so I wonder, do you think that that approach would work from a junior to a senior as well? Or what would you advise, say, an intern who's experiencing bullying? What would you say to them? This is how you can do it. Because you're right, it's very subtle bullying. It's not like all out like, oh, you're a, disgusting human being. It's very subtle things. And so it's difficult, I feel like, when an intern asks me, how do I deal with bullying? I'm like, I'm not sure. It's really tough. Like, yeah, go talk to someone. But sometimes that doesn't work either because they might be like, oh, you did this wrong, so you should just listen to your senior. But the approach the senior had was a very demoralizing approach and doesn't really make an environment which is conducive for learning and improving.
I know it can be very difficult, and especially for someone who is in the system new, like most of the international medical graduates, the junior doctors who've started fresh in the system, and they're not just completely at terms with how things work and how things can be taken in a bit of an obtuse way. I think you have to have an understanding. You have to have some sort of background knowledge. And I think just talking about this issue right now with you, it just raises your awareness to a slightly better level. That you're aware that there's something's quite not right. And if you feel something's quite not right in terms of bullying or harassment or even a physical touch, you've got to open up. You've got to talk. And now in Australia in particular, how much awareness has it been around the bullying, harassment and, racial sort of culture is just completely changed. And that change of events gets triggered when you notify. So if you're able to talk and notify, there are means in place to support you. So I think often the biggest issue is not to report or not to talk about it. So you need to have some sort of awareness enough to report it and let the chain of action just take it from there. You don't have to have every understanding. The worst case scenario is fine. You learn something out of it. But the best case scenario is, look, it's not acceptable. And that person will get a lesson of their life not to repeat it again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. When I was watching your videos and looking through your Instagram, I got this impression that you just really love Sydney. And I love that because I was born here and this is like my favorite city in the world. Every time I tell my friends, I'm like, I hate every other city. Sydney's the best. So I wonder if when you came to Australia, was there ever any moments that made you feel unwelcome in Sydney? Or did you ever experience any racism growing up or being in Sydney?
So I live in Cronulla.
Yes.
And as most people would know Cronulla, that's the famous Cronulla Rights, right?
Yes.
That's the place you would not be if you're a brown person, right? But I feel that, it's up to you. Sometimes you could be completely oblivious, could be naive. You don't want to absorb any of the confrontations. Living in Cronulla for about 17 years, my wife's got a practice there. She's a general practitioner. I think the more confident you are inside you, the positive vibes and the distance is very forth-put. So I think that's very important. If you're able to display yourself as a professional, as a person of discipline, as a person who recognizes each of every overtones and undertones, you can have this halo around you, which will protect you. The other thing is, there are incidents which have happened, but not to a major degree that I would count that. Look, I think I probably have faced more racism in Karachi as a Pakistani. And there's a lot of it there, actually. Are you Punjabi or are you Karachi, Urdu speaking, or are you Pathan? So we probably more mellowed down. We take it as a joke. But here, even as a joke, how serious it could be.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about you, how you like to take it and absorb it and be, okay with that. Or you just create this very tight shell around you of professionalism and a personality. The way you conduct yourself, it's very important as well. So often the people who are highly educated, they are mentally more aware of their circumstance and then their space. And they can often react and respond in a much better way.
Yeah. I think that's a really good approach to it. And I wonder is that the same approach you have for when you face difficulties in your career? What are some of the most difficult moments you've had in your career? Is that the same approach you would have for those moments?
Not every time, Hamza. I think you have to pace yourself up. When the matters are more personal and dear, related to the family, you can't have that very strong, level-headed approach because that would often shatter the families. And there could be confrontations, there could be issues. But if you're trying to take a very, uniform approach around those issues, which require more subtlety, more compassion and empathy, then you're not going to solve the problem. And that is personally where, most of the issues in the family and, your loved ones, that where they stem from. Sometimes even in your workplace, you have to have a certain level of understanding and approach it in a way. I was watching this interview of Singapore Prime Minister. It was a very good interview in which he was confronted with very tough questions from one of this British at once some of the economic moments, and the idea was that he was grilled pretty much that Singapore society, it's very very binary society, yes and no, they're very hardline rules, and it's not a true democracy as US and UK and other European countries are. And the way he was able to handle them with a bit of humor, with a bit of example and facts and evidence, it was just a lesson in its own right. I think I'm constantly learning these new ways of responding to some of the toughest situations. And there have been so many.
What would you say is the toughest moment in your career? If you had to place a number one sort of moment.
Look, there have been some challenges. And lately, one of the challenges which I had recently, not recently, I said a number of years ago, which I tried to work with that and it didn't work, but then I tried to utilize it as my positive point. So I tried to work and apply, because you know how passionate I'm about IMGs and international medical graduates and trying to work with them. So there was a job available in where I work in terms of being an IMG sort of advocate, and it was a very official role in which you're mentoring them and all that. And I applied for the job. I interviewed for that job. And I laid out an entire structure. That's how I'm going to do it. This is how it happens. I'm telling you, I've got evidence behind me. I've got testimonials behind me. And I thought, look, who else would they possibly give this job to? And I didn't get that job. And I thought, okay, fine. This is very odd. This is in fact wrong.
Yeah.
That the person with most adequate and relevant credentials has not been given an opportunity. I said, fine, that's fine. I'll just dedicate that energy to my business. And trust me, when I didn't get the job, I invested same amount of energy in my business. And within a matter of months, I was able to generate so much income in that idea sector that I said, man, to hell with that. If somebody doesn't want to listen to those ideas and freshness that I've got to offer, I'm going to turn it and pour that energy into my own business, which at least would be more financially rewarding and personally satisfying. And I'm so thankful for that, having that collateral approach. That, I'm not defined by anyone who they don't like me or they don't want to hire me for that role. In fact, if I would have, in the hindsight, would have ended up taking that role, it would have scaled my business in so many different ways. There are different lessons from every challenge.
Definitely.
And I think you should make those challenges work for you.
Yes.
Learn a lesson and turn that failure of an interview into, as we've talked about, failure in an exam, work for in any direction. Look, at the end of the exam, I'm going to do this, that. So you've got to make sure that from every failure, there's a strength which is catalyzed into a reaction, which sets a chain of reaction, which is financially rewarding and personally rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's just hard to, for me personally, sometimes when failure does happen, it can feel quite demoralizing in that moment. And then I think the thing I'd like to be better at is just getting quicker at getting back up and trying again. Because I think at this stage of my life where when something happens, I'm like, I have to take a seat back and then, all right, I'm ready to try again.
Yeah. There's often a problem with the younger generation. Like, they're more outcome based and they want their outcomes to be very instant. And very quick in a way. And, disappointments are hard. Like, don't get me wrong. When you upload your video and you don't get like the number of views
that you're getting, views straight away.
it's like, you're disappointed. But the thing is that you learn as a part of that process. And we're talking about YouTube as an analogy, but I think there's so many different things that you can relate to in your life, that everything's very soft and subtle. And me getting rejected for that particular job after being in that system for about 17 years, already doing that job, I knew that, look, for the level of ideas that I have got and the amount of, good things I can bring to that project, nobody can even think about it. But instead of, winding myself down, I tried to convert it into a more positive outcome for myself. And I know for the first 2 days, I was just like, man, the system is broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't reward you. There's no place for, new ideas. Maybe it's racism, all these kind of things.
Which is normal, I think. That's
which is, it's completely, you're in anger and then you go to denial. I'm not going to do it. And I think you have to have some other alternate ways of venting your energy.
Yeah, and using that negative into something positive, like you said. Very interesting. Something I always really love to hear about is like a good immigrant success story. And I think, my mum and dad are examples of that, but I see that in yourself as well, definitely, that, you came from Pakistan, went to UK and now Australia, and it seems like you've done really well for yourself and your family here. What do you think it means to be a Pakistani Australian, and what do you wish for future generations, say like your son or myself, Australian-born second-generation immigrants, to know going forward?
That's a very tough question. And no matter how many ways I try to think about it to come up with a solution, the more perplexed and complicated it gets. Look, I can only define the journey of a success on my own time frame. I had certain level of challenges. I had limitations. I had my fair share of failures, which sometimes they worked into successes and positive outcome, and sometimes they don't. Most times they don't. I cannot really define a journey for you or for my son for that matter. But what I can say as a generic formula to say is that avoid being overtly disappointed with these little failures, but instead try extract one positive out of it. Even if you can extract a small success, trust me, that small success is like going to grow as a compounding interest.
Right.
And you won't realize that.
Right.
You will have that better return 5 years, 10 years down the line. So don't wind yourself down that, look, I failed in that test. I could not go into, like yourself, get into med school in the first go. You had to take a postgraduate, degree to get it. But you made it happen for you. You weren't just, that's it, I'm done. World is tough. racism and all that. When you try to find explanation and reasons, trust me, there'll be people around you who would always give you a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah.
But that will lower your bar of standard.
Yeah.
And, down the line, you'll say, oh, I had this in my life, so I ended up like being this. And talking to various IMGs, like they've got personal issues, or there's some maternity issues, or I had a complicated childbirth, so I had to give up the time. I couldn't practice for 5 years. Like my wife didn't practice for 7 years. But then again, she made it happen for her.
Yeah.
She did not let that failure or limitation be a part of a story for the rest of her life. She passed the fellowship exam for general practitioners.
Yeah.
And that was the happiest day. Like, I'm a fellow, she's a fellow.
Yeah.
We didn't let our failure define our life.
Yeah.
And I think that goes on for every young person or a doctor or an IMG, that try to define your life by virtue of your successes built on failures, instead of having those failures define the rest of your life at a substandard level.
Yeah.
I hope it makes sense.
It really does, and I really love what you've said there. I think it's something I need to get better at. But I have had experiences where I've demonstrated that to myself, but I want to keep honing in on that and keep using those little small failures to build that success. That's really lovely point. You've talked a lot about your mum and dad and how much of an influence they've had on you. I wonder, what do you personally think are the best traits you've gotten from your dad and gotten from your mum?
Oh, that's a tough one. As I said, my dad was a dreamer.
Yeah.
He was a bit of an artist. And I think he didn't get to manifest his true artistic potential and convert his dream into like real businesses he wanted to. And my mom was a get-goer. Like, she wouldn't dream, and she was just very materialistic. And I think that goes on for every woman in an Asian household. Mom is like switched on mathematical. Dad is more on the global scale, how to solve this issue and that issue. So I think I had that thing, but it took it quite literally. Like, I had the positive influence from both of them. My dad was a very good conversationalist. And I think I took some of those traits, in fact, probably about 10% of it, what he was. And I tried to convert that into an interest, into a passion with the videos and with the teaching. And he tried to simplify things when he was trying to explain.
Right.
And from my mom's side of things, she was always very practical. Try not to be very emotionally attached to something. I think that was one of the most important lessons I got from my mom, that detach yourself emotionally from your closed ones, from your friends. Don't be reliant on them, that if they turn you down, you are total wreck. You have to have a practical approach in life. You're just worth so much more, and things and opportunities always turn up. And that's what she's shown in her life. And she's converted so much yield. Despite the turmoil, she came out from a very average background. In fact, she was only intermediate or high school pass when she married my father. And then she did graduation, then she did postgraduate studies, and then made it happen for her. And I just value her. And, not that when it came to the decision of buying a house, she would go and pick herself the nicest house, despite us having no resources. And somehow things would work out. So she always dreamt high, but also practically she was very switched on. And as opposed to my father, who always dreamt high and always tried to get some sort of affirmation that, can I do it? Can I? And it never happened. Because when you ask too many questions, it never happens.
Yeah,
you have to make it happen for you.
Yeah. Something I reflect on when I look at my parents' lives and ours now as second generation immigrants is it's the title of Barack Obama's first book, Dreams of My Father. And it's that we get to live the dreams that our parents never got to fulfill because of the opportunity they, worked so hard in, XYZ. And so now you get to be doing whatever it is you're doing. I remember I was on a walk one day with my dad, and I asked him, so my dad's a chemical engineer, and I asked him, Dad, if you couldn't do chemical engineer, and money wasn't an issue, so he came from a poor background, and I said, money wasn't an issue, you could do whatever you wanted when you were 18, what would you have done? And he was like, I would have been a doctor. I was like, that's so interesting, because that was your dream, and you never got to do that because you didn't have the money or resources. Like, my dad was the first person in his whole family to go to university, and so because he didn't get that, now his children get to live that dream for him.
That's very true.
And I found that so beautiful, and I see that in many immigrant stories as well, is that we get to live the dreams of our parents, which I think is lovely.
Could not have said it nicely.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah.
I think and anybody and everybody could relate. You try to make the life so much better for the generation on, and it does happen. And sometimes it doesn't happen either. Like, I've seen some of the very successful doctors, and their children are just completely a total mess.
Yeah.
And there's so many different variables. I think there can be an understanding that would happen, but as a parent and as a children, like as your child, you have to have a certain level of approach. You have to be switched on. You have to reciprocate their interest and commitment by showing the interest and commitment in yourself that, look, my father's worked pretty hard. I need to return back. It's one of those relationships which, when you're a parent, you'll understand.
Hopefully not too soon. Rizwan, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for sharing those stories. It's, like I said, it's always so interesting for me learning about someone who's come from a different country and now here in Australia, because that's not something that I had to go through. That's not a struggle I had to go through. And so I think it's something we take for granted, being second generation immigrants. So thank you for your stories and thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Cheers.